literary critic, but also as an American who's been over here for 10 years, are you able to stand back from this a bit, or are you caught up in the euphoria that most people share?
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to use the word euphoria as well. I think that's a very good description of how I felt for the last 36 hours or so. But I can stand back a little bit. I mean, I think that there are reservations that we're all talking about, the high expectations that this has raised. I do think we need to resist convincing ourselves that we've just inaugurated the United States of utopia, that there are dangers to that kind of euphoria themselves. But I also think it's hard to underestimate the symbolic import of this election. And I do think there was, and as a literary critic, I do think that there was a profoundly symbolic transformation that just happened. It may not turn out to be a real transformation, but the symbolism in and of itself is important, and in and of itself is real. It was a symbolic redemption. It was a symbolic reconciliation of a rift that goes at least as far back as the Civil War. In reality, goes back farther. With respect, Andrew, I have to disagree profoundly with the idea that America is not a racist country. Within my lifetime, which is less than the 40 years that you mentioned, it is very clear to me that racism is a profound problem in America. But it is true that the rift in America is not just about race, and that the election is not just about race. I think that we need to resist reading those southern precincts that Ronwin mentioned as voting crudely or simply along race lines. They were clearly voting on class lines as well. They were voting against the liberal elite, the latte quaffing. We know that whole rift as well. They were very much voting as a small town constituency against the corrupt big cities and the decadence that all of us liberal Ivy League elites represent. But it was about race as well. I mean, this seems to be something that we've been evading and yet talking about and not talking about. And as I tried to characterize how race worked, it seemed to me that this was a race about race that wasn't about race while the race was on. But when the race was over, everyone knew that it was about race because we had just transcended race. And yet race remained at the forefront of the emotional impact of the election. Now that's as clear as I can get about what just happened in terms of race. And that complication in and of itself is, I think, part of why this transformation was so important, because we have seen something symbolic happen here, and I agree with Bill that it will prove to have been a genuine turning point. I think whether it will turn out to be a turning point and a realignment in governance, in terms of governance or fiscal policy or foreign policy, who knows? But I think it represents an attitudinal shift. The problem of America has always been the problem of e pluribus unum, of how do you get one out of many? How do you deal with pluralism? How do you deal with difference? And the splits in America are not just racial splits, they're not just class splits, there's the culture wars. I mean, but it goes all the way back to the land of freedom and the land of institutional slavery, the land of enlightenment, philosophes and Puritan theocrats. And those differences have carried all the way through. It's not like those ended, in the 19th century. States' rights versus federalism, we're still fighting that. The urban north and the rural south, and of course liberal and conservative. The reason why there's such a profound partisan split in America is because we have profound partisan differences. We have not had a functioning consensus about major issues of governance and social policy, from arguments over government intervention and fiscal policy to the war in Iraq or social justice, the death penalty, gun control, the question of whether zygotes are people, whether women's health should be in scare quotes, whether it's important to save polar bears. I mean, these are all real differences in how Americans are looking at their world, their country, and then by extension at the world. And the election of one Messiah has not reconciled all of these differences. We all know that. Hypocrisy is alive and well. The economy is not. Republicans are screaming about fiscal conservatism, but handing out $700 billion, or Palin is redistributing wealth in Alaska, happily. But we also have Democrats shouting about social justice while pocketing money and kickbacks from corporate lobbyists. It hasn't ended corruption, gridlock. It hasn't reformed campaign finance, and I do think that campaign finance is a real worry about. One of the things that Obama has transformed here is the fact that you need to raise enough money to bail out Lehman's in order to run for president. But I do think that at the end of the day, it's ideas that bring us together, and it's ideas that pull us apart. And for me, one of the things that one of the moments that emblematized this election was and it was such a quick move from McCain's concession speech to Obama's acceptance speech. And I'm sure a lot of us noticed that at McCain's concession speech, when he first mentioned Obama's name, his supporters booed. And when Obama, in his acceptance speech in front of my fellow Chicagoans, 250,000 strong, supporting Obama, when he first mentioned McCain, the crowd cheered. That to me emblematized the attitudinal shift, the move from a politics of divisiveness to a politics of unification. And I just want to end on a typically sentimental note. I am an American and we do feel sentimental about this. I think for important reasons. Obama quoted Lincoln's first inaugural address when he said, "We must not be enemies, though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection." But he left out the last sentence of Lincoln's speech for reasons that I think are clear, but I think because he couldn't say them, but I think somebody else can. And so this is what I'd like to end on, is the words of Lincoln. "The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature."
Thank you very much.